Welcome to Marketing Cupcakes, a quantitative marketing podcast where we bring you the latest techniques in marketing analytics, data science, systems integrations, growth hacking, guerrilla marketing, and data architecting.
Hey guys, what's up? Dave here and James. So today we're going to be talking about Martech. And we talk about Martech a lot, but specifically this time, overpaying for Martech, and it's probably something that you can simplify. James, how much, at your previous companies, how much, and James has worked with some really big companies, but how much a year, have you seen companies spend in Martech?
So I've seen budgets with Martech reach well over $1 million easily. You have that ranging from an automation platform to things like a DAM, digital asset management, to an analytics platform. All that stuff is now funneling into the marketing budget, which is why we talk about Martech so much, because there's so many technologies out there. How do you choose between them all?
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that was just for the technology. That did not include the people to manage the technology.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the people, not only just the people, but having the right people that understand the technology enough to be able to execute in it is a whole other thing. And then you have ramp up time. So if they don't know the technology, you have to be able to train them, make sure they understand it well enough to execute. So none of that is considered in that cost.
So one of the interesting things about James and I is I come from a startup world and James comes from an enterprise world. And so we have very interesting overlaps in what we know, but also very different views on a lot of the things. And so it's really interesting as we talk about, what's high cost. Like I look at something that's a high cost over $1,000 a month, where James is looking, he laughs at that,
We're like, oh, 20,000 is more
yeah.
like a cost.
Yeah. So, but one of the strengths about having us in this position is what it allows us to do is look at Martech from two different views. And so we're looking at, okay, what are the features that you're using and paying for that's costing, $30,000 or $50,000 a month? And what are the features that I've used in the past that, have cost $500 a month? And can you get similar functionality, and is it really worth paying all that?
Yeah, the interesting thing is on an enterprise level, there's so many companies that just look at the brands that are owning market share because they think that that is the technology that's going to offer the most bang for their buck. But the more and more that Dave and I talk and we discover more and more technologies, the more we see that you can do something pretty extraordinary with something very simple. And sometimes that's better.
Yeah, so, and when we were considering our own Martech stack, I had this just issue with all of the marketing technology out there today. And I'm sure you guys have looked at it. I'm sure you all know, if you've been to Martech, what's that page called? It's the chiefmartech.com. That's right.
If you haven't, you should.
Yeah, it's a really interesting map as you look at, if you go from 2011 to 2016, went from 1,100 companies, I think, to 4,500, right around there. It's just crazy, the amount of technology that you can use. So, just for integrations, you can look at different technology providers that are charging $500 a month. And so, a while ago, I started getting frustrated, and I started thinking, this technology is just growing and growing in cost. And how many more technologies can actually be implemented and be used? And what happens to all these big systems like Marketo or HubSpot or Eloqua, Pardot, where they're trying to be this all-in-one system, but they're kind of missing the boat on a lot of the little things, And we started thinking about this and talking about it. And as we started looking around and looking at some of the smaller technologies, we noticed something that was really interesting. There's a lot of startup, and this is very true in the startup world with any industry, but what we noticed is a lot of these smaller companies were really just focusing on one or two or maybe three things and just focusing on doing those really well, right? And I'm sure a lot of you can relate. In any business that you're in, anytime you specialize and do something really, really well, you're gonna beat out your competition. And you might have a big marketing automation platform that you're using, but they probably don't do everything really well. They probably are generalist, and they can do okay on everything, but not really, really good on one thing.
Or you have a really big system and you have a few others that kind of integrate into it, and you're not sure how to make it all work together. All of that is part of the Martech stack.
Yeah, and so I think this illusion is that we've been fed for years that everybody's going to move towards this all-in-one marketing system. And I don't think that really exists. I mean, if any of you out there are only using one marketing system, and Google Analytics counts, so you have to count that as well. But if you're only using one automation system, one CRM altogether, we'd love to hear about it. Because every company we've ever met, they're always using multiple different technologies in order to make their marketing and sales work.
Yeah, like for example, a lot of people don't like using Google Tag Manager, so they'll buy a tag management system like Telium or something like that. And that reiterates the point that Dave is making is you're going to use multiple technologies. There's not really a way of getting around that now, simply because there really aren't technologies that exist that can do everything really, really well, which is why there's so many that are niched.
Yeah, and so what we started seeing is we started looking at these different little niche companies that do things really well, like chat. Like, I'm sure most of you are familiar with some of the chats out there right now that are really taking the market, and they're a large portion of the market share. Intercom's probably the biggest. Drift is doing really well as well. And you can check those out if you're not using either one of those. But those are companies that are specializing just in chat, and Intercom's kind of expanding to take on some of the Zendesk, the customer support platforms and the automation. But they're focusing on their core products, and they're making them really, really well before they expand. Another example is lead pages. Funny enough, as James and I were talking about this, we stumbled upon Lead Page's new product called Center. And if you haven't seen that, it's really, really cool. And in fact, the CEO, he wrote a thesis about Center and what they think is the future of marketing technology. And what's interesting is he wrote the exact blog or exact thesis of what we were talking about and how we were feeling. So everything we're talking about here, we'll link to this in the show notes. But he talks about they're putting all of their efforts behind this center idea, which is that you have all these different. The future of marketing technology isn't an all-in-one solution, but it's utilizing all these different smaller niche technologies and hooking them all together, and then having a place to manage all the systems in one spot. And that's what Center is really, I think, moving towards, which is a great concept. And for those of you that are using multiple different systems, I'm sure you can appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think the other, like, if you are on the flip side of this coin and you think no, that's not going to happen. Well, here's just an example for you. I would love for you to help us understand how Google Analytics is ever going to be taken over by somebody else besides Google. So that little nugget of information, you're always going to have to figure out how to integrate Google Analytics with whatever system you're using. And that's why we really do believe in this center idea, and we feel the same way. We feel like that's exactly what's going to happen in marketing technology. And when you go to the Martech site and you look at that, and you look at the visual that they have, and you see all those companies on there, you'll see why we think that.
Yeah, so the title for the topic today is to simplify your Martech, and so what we would say is start looking for those vendors that you can use that are really, really good at one thing. Lead Pages, if you've noticed, what they've done is they have branded all of their products with a Lead Pages sub message. But they're all different products, and they can stand alone. So they have Drip, which is an email automation. They have Center, which is kind of tying everything together, and then they have Lead Pages. They might have one or two others, but those are the three that I know about the most. But our advice is to start moving away from the big automation platforms that probably are costing you a lot of money. I mean, we're going to be doing a webinar here in a week or two, and we're going to be talking about a big a big migration that James did where he took 9 different automation platforms that their company was using and migrated it down to one. And it saved them about 57% reduction in costs and about $300,000 a year bump in margin.
And you might be thinking, well, why did we have 9 automation platforms? And that's because we went through a series of acquisitions of acquiring different companies who had different platforms. So you can imagine going through that was a pretty big task, and we'll go over all those details in the webinar. It's a pretty awesome story.
Well, not only that, but you had a lot of overlap too.
Oh yeah, I mean, even before we even acquired a single company, we were looking at our automation and we're asked to clear budgets, and just looking at what we had before the acquisitions, we had so much overlap. We still saved a ton without any acquisitions and bringing on any new automation platforms.
Cool, guys. So hopefully that gives you guys some ideas about what the future of marketing technology is going to look like, and ways to start thinking about simplifying your marketing technology. Because at the end of the day, just think about your goals. I mean, your goal is not to have all this technology that you have to babysit and you have to manage. Your goal is to grow your business, and that's everybody's goal. I mean, it's the same for everybody. It's just in different ways, and what works for one company is going to be different for another company. The channel that works for one company is going to be different than another company. And don't follow the herd. Everybody's doing Facebook advertising. So my advice to you is, if everybody's doing that, do what they're not doing. Chase a platform that's new, that's disruptive. Don't follow the herd, because that's when it gets expensive, and that's when it gets hard. If you don't do what everybody else is doing, you'll be a lot more effective in getting business.
And don't get caught up in the hype of, I need this technology to analyze this. I need this technology to analyze that. What you will find is, if you really dig deep into some of these technologies that are a little bit smaller than the big ones, you're more than capable of doing just as much, if not more. And all you have to do is really get in the nit and grit and get in the weeds a little bit with some of them to figure that out.
And by the way, we help companies with that, so if you need help, give us a call. We'd love to work with you guys. That's it for today. James, you have anything else?
No.
Okay.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Marketing Cupcakes, an Endure podcast. For more great content and to stay up to date on the latest marketing techniques, visit endure.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate the podcast. We'll catch you next time on Marketing Cupcakes.